This is the story of a time in which my virginity was almost lost, but instead was found. Let me take you back to an ancient time, the 90s, when overly large jeans, loud music, and spiky hair were all the craze. If I remember correctly, the year was 1494. We trolls were forced to live in exile on the far side of the enchanted forest. We were ugly and unwanted by the rest of the enchanted kingdom. I had my synthesizer and would play dark, medieval fantasy tunes in my room in our family cave. Unfortunately, no one wanted to hear my music. My mama told me, get a real job. But what was a troll to do for a living? Chop wood? Sharpen swords? No, I was a musician, an artist. I had no friends except for my mom and my synthesizer. One day I was sitting in our cave, shredding a sick synth tune. My mom said it was good, but I know I could do better. Anyways, as I played, all the other trolls were dancing around a fire and drinking wine, having a party. But I don't party, so I sat inside in darkness, writing my masterpiece. Suddenly I heard shouting. My mother rushed in and told me to come out. "No, Mom," I shouted. She was always trying to get me to be social at parties. No thanks. She liked to be the life of the party, getting drunk on wine, being the loudest and most talkative troll around. But that is not who I was. "Come here or you're grounded. No synthesizer for a week," she hissed. I had to obey her. She was my mother. Plus, she really was an intimidating woman. I laid down my synthesizer and stepped out of the cave, legs shaking with nerves. The whole village was looking at me. Oh, how I hated it. I wanted to turn and run back into my cave where I could be alone and work on my tunes. My social anxiety was real bad, you see. "The bride wants to dance with you," spoke my mother. You see, this wasn't just any kind of party. It was a wedding reception. Wendy Toadslayer was the bride. She was my childhood babysitter. As I mentioned before, we trolls were the ugliest animals in existence. But if there ever was a troll who caught the attention of my misshapen eyes, it was Wendy Toadslayer. When I was a wee lad, she would watch me when my mom was away. She would wear dresses that were always just a little too tight, and when she would bend over, one could occasionally catch an accidental glance at her corset. I wasn't trying to look. I feel that would be both creepy and morally wrong, but I wasn't going to complain when it happened. At first I didn't think much of her, but one day I was jamming on my synth when I should have been sleeping, and she punished me. She spanked me until I cried. Later, she put me to bed and apologized, saying she went too far. I was so hurt and humiliated, but also something else. I became aroused by this, but I couldn't tell her, no matter how hard I wanted to. Anyways, I stood here at her wedding reception, shaking in my boots as the whole village looked upon me, as Wendy Toadslayer wanted me to dance with her. Part of me wanted to, but part of me was afraid. The piper began to pipe a tune, and she started to sway her hips back and forth. A bead of sweat ran down my hideous face. I didn't know what to do. I don't know how to dance, and I didn't have the personality to fake it. That's when I turned and ran. I fled to my cave. I was so embarrassed, and my hideous cheeks were surely growing bright red. The whole town was undoubtedly laughing at me. I could not be seen here. I had to get out. I knew not where I was going. I just had to be anywhere but here. I turned for the opening of the cave, but stopped dead in my tracks. There in the opening of the cave stood the silhouetted figure of my mother. "Melvin, come here. Now," she snarled. I approached her slowly, my head down, eyes looking at the ground. I stopped in front of her. "Look at me," she demanded. "No," I replied valiantly. "I don't want to." "Melvin," she shouted with the power of 1,000 thunders. I slowly raised my eyes up to meet hers. She was tall, and her high heels made her seem almost impossibly massive before me. I trembled before her majesty. Oh, how I hated her, but oh, how I loved her. "You will get back to the party this instant," she demanded. I replied stoically, But, Mom." Tears filled my eyes. Even a valiant warrior such as myself must cry when it is justified, and I was facing extreme hardship. Even men can show vulnerability occasionally, despite what Mom says. I just want to stay here and play my synthesizer." "You and that damn synthesizer," she shouted. "You are coming out to dance with her this instant. It's bad luck to refuse the dance of the bride on her wedding night." She grabbed my musically inclined ear and yanked it. I had no choice but to follow her. She led me out to the party. Everyone was staring at me, and it was making me feel like super nervous and stuff. But the worst part was, I was crying, and Wendy Toadslayer saw me crying, as did her new husband Brad. He was a real man, but she probably thought I was just a child. In fact, she probably wanted to spank me then. I turned to my mother. I took in a deep breath and then shouted back with all my might, "Mama hate you and I'm gonna run away and never come back." And with that I took off running and fled the troll village for the first time in my life and entered the unknown. It was so cold, and I haven't much meat upon my bones to keep me warm. I tried eating the mushrooms, but they just made me feel funny and didn't fill me up. I eventually came across a path which led me out of the forest and into a strange town filled with gray stone buildings. The whole town had a strange red glow to it. I walked alone down the road when I heard a scream. It was coming from one of the buildings. I slowly approached the building and looked through a small window into what seemed to be a woman's bedroom. There was a woman lying face down on her bed, screaming her lungs out. I couldn't get a good look at her because there was a strange masked being standing over her. He had huge, hulking, bulging muscles and held a leather whip. He was whipping the woman, and she was screaming. She was in danger, but what could I do? My slender, scrawny, misshapen troll body was no match for a being of such immense girth, but I had to help her. I formulated a plan and set it in motion. I always carry mace with me. Since I am slender, it is good to carry a weapon. There are two types of weapons referred to by the word mace. The first is a small bottle that women spray into an attacker's eyes. My master tells me I am not allowed to use this kind, as only women can use mace, and for a male to use it would be deeply shameful. I am not sure exactly why, as it seems weird to say certain genders have to use certain weapons. The second type of mace is a metal ball with spikes on it, which is attached to a handle and is swung at a victim. Apparently, this version is much more manly. While some people have later claimed that I had the unmanly kind of mace that you spray on potential attackers, this is actually not the case. I, of course, had the super manly kind of mace, and I had to lure the beast over to hit him with it. I crouched in a bush and picked up a small stone. I threw the stone at the window of the bedroom. It fell with a heavy thunk. "Who's there?" the hulking beast grunted. I will admit I was very afraid at the moment. I tried to remain still, hidden in my bush. It is always good to hide your insecurities in a bush, I have been told. He reached for my bush and gave a tug, and pulled me straight up so that we were seeing eye to eye. The beast's mask was made of shiny black leather. It had 3 round holes, one where his eyes should be, and one where his mouth should be. But the mouth hole was filled with one large red orb, which appeared to be a third eye. I wondered why he would wear a mask, but then I realized he must be real ugly. Even we trolls didn't wear masks, and we were hideous. I had heard legend of a creature that was even uglier than a troll, a Cyclops. This must be a Cyclops. I gazed through the eye holes at its wild eyes, and in that moment, I held up my mace and sprayed it into the upper eyes of the beast. Wait a minute, no, that's not right. I didn't have the type of mace you spray, no. I meant to type. I raised up a mace and struck the beast over the head. He dropped me and fell to the ground. He took off his mask, then removed the lower red eye from his face, and a mouth hole appeared in its place. "Ow, my eyes," shouted the beast, which is kind of weird because I hit him over the head with a large metal object. I knew right then that the beast I had just toppled was a 3-eyed Cyclops. I, Melvin, a lowly cave troll, had slain a mythical beast. I questioned the beast as to why he was hurting the fair maiden in her quarters. He insisted they were making love, but I knew this wasn't true, as I had seen him inflicting physical damage upon her. Before he could answer, he went into a state of hysteria, complaining that he could not see. Ironic for someone who had torn his large red eye from his own face. He told me this third eye was referred to as a gag ball, and could not in fact see. Anyways, I decided to approach the fair maiden in the cottage to see if she was alright. However, the ghastly sight of my ugly trollish face was sure to frighten a beauty such as herself. I grabbed the beast's shiny leather mask, put it over my face, the third eye hole situated perfectly for my mouth, and headed inside. "Mike?" I heard her cry out. I ran into the bedroom and shouted, "Nay, it is I, Sir Melvin. I have rescued you from the beast." The woman quickly covered herself in a sheet before I could see her. "What do you want? Who are you?" she cried in a panicked voice. "No need to worry, fair maid," I did retort. "I have slain the hideous beast and come in to check on you. I wear the beast's mask, but I am not him." She replied, "Oh, you must be one of Mike's friends. He mentioned he might bring some friends into our bedroom." Then the fair maid sat up and removed the sheet which covered her. I saw 2 large, beautiful breasts. I instantly fell in love. Now don't call me a pervert. I respect women. Believe me, women are more than sex objects. They are deserving of dignity and respect. And yes, it is true I am a virgin who longs for human connection, and it is true I have sexual desires. However, I do not feel women owe me sex, nor do I feel like I have the right to demand sex from any woman. I hope to lose my virginity one day, but the right moment hasn't come. I am patiently waiting for a woman to come take it from me. I wish women would approach me instead of me being expected to approach them. Anyways, that's besides the point. Above her 2 large milky white breasts was a shiny leather mask, which she wore over her face. I was confused. Why would such a beautiful woman cover her face? Why was she wearing a mask like that of her enemy who had attacked her? Do you like role-playing? She asked me with a voice as sweet as an angel. Yes, I replied. I love pretending to be a wizard. Role-playing was my favorite activity apart from jamming on my synthesizer. But I thought girls didn't like role-playing. They thought it was nerdy. But could this beautiful woman really be into role-playing? Do you like role-playing too? I asked her. She told me that she did. I desperately wanted to role-play with a woman. I could pretend to be a wizard and she could pretend to be a sorceress. She began to rub her nipples, which for some reason looked hard even though it wasn't even cold that morning. She asked me if I wanted them. A wave of confusion rose over me. Role-playing with a woman had always been a dream of mine, but my desire to engage in the role-play was even less than my desire to suckle one of her milky white teats. What was going on? Had she cast a love spell on me? What is your fetish? She asked me. Well, as a wizard, my fetish is obviously my large magic wand, I informed her. Oh, she said, sounds nice. Is it hard? What a stupid question, but I don't want to be rude. So I kindly explained in an only minorly sarcastic voice, well, yeah, it's hard. It's made of wood. She giggled and told me I was cute. She then pointed to a leather whip that was on the floor. It was the one the beast hath used upon her earlier. Whip me, she said. I was confused. Why would anyone want to be whipped? The only thing I had ever whipped was cream. Maybe a babysitter like Wendy had whipped her when she was a child and now she feels like she deserves to keep getting whipped. But she wasn't as useless as me. She deserved better. I told her I would not whip her. She curiously replied, Oh, I see how it is. You must want me to whip you. No, I shouted, don't whip me. She replied, Yes, plead with me, slave. Beg me not to whip you. I begged her not to whip me, but she whipped me anyway, all over my back and behind. I cried and pleaded with her to stop, but she would not stop. She just kept telling me she liked how I begged. Eventually, I mustered up enough strength to run out of there, fleeing her cottage. Unfortunately, throughout the ordeal, I somehow lost all my clothes, so I ran naked down the road wearing nothing but that strange leather mask. I desperately wanted to act like a grown-up. I was 18 after all, but at that point I wanted to be back in the safety and comfort of my village. I wanted my mother to tell me I would be all right. When I returned to the village, many villagers were in the town square, and they gazed upon my naked, bloody body. Fortunately, I had my mask to conceal my identity. They all laughed and told me to remove my mask, calling me strange words like gimp. I turned and saw Wendy Toadslayer and her new husband Brad. Gosh, he looked so strong and manly. Even he laughed at me. Finally, a couple big, strong trolls came up behind me and tore my mask off, revealing my identity to the whole village. They all continued to laugh and mock me. However, when I looked at Wendy, she was not laughing. She could be stern, but in times like this, it was clear how compassionate she was. Part of me wished she would laugh. I deserved it. I ran back into my cave and cried. Many years later, I sit here in my dungeon, reminiscing on the days of my freedom. Days when I lived in a whole village of trolls who weren't so different from me. I long to return to those days, but I never will. Suddenly I hear footsteps. My master has returned to her castle. Oh, how I fear her. I must retire for the night and pretend to be asleep. I bid thee farewell from now. But I vow to return to you with more stories from my life. We trolls are a dying race, though you can still find us lurking all over the internet.